It is time to talk about time anxiety, Corey, and I have to admit I'm a little bit anxious about this one.
Nicely done. Nicely done with your intro there. Time to talk about time, anxiety.
Yeah, this is an interesting topic. I'm excited to talk about the book. We've got a couple items here for follow up, and they're both yours since you made me commit publicly to writing a book last time, which I think is only fair.
Yeah,
So,
I don't feel bad
all
about that
right.
for 1 second. No, I don't feel bad about that for 1 second. So the first thing was I need to talk to you about accountability. I did not do this, right? And the reason why I didn't do this is because you were working on the launch of the help me, Chris.
Overcoming procrastination.
But it's Chris Bailey, right? Do I have
Yep.
the name right?
Yep.
Okay. So you're working on the launch, and I was like, okay, I can't pile on to him right now. So now that I know that that has happened, and you are on the tail end, I don't know how much you're on the tail end of that, but now that I know that that's happened, I actually may carry this one forward and say, even though it has nothing to do with
Okay.
the time anxiety book, I'm going to carry this one forward because I think we do need to establish what the plan is. You might be surprised, not really, that the next one was maybe start the process. And no, I didn't even hold you accountable to like talking about it. So how are we to start the process? But I will say, I did start the process on my own journey here, and
Okay.
so here's been one of the things. So I think I've mentioned this before. It's a children's chapter book that's related to like STEM ideas, and a big piece of that is an illustrator. Like the pictures go hand in hand with the text. And if they don't go together well, it makes kind of a not very good kids chapter book, right? Because kids love the images and they love the cover and they love the like little line drawings that are inside of it. I have secured a partner to do the illustrations on this book. And I
Nice.
am jazzed, right? Like I reached out to her and I said, hey, would you be interested in doing this? You're a really cool artist, blah, blah, blah. She came back to me and said, okay, let's talk. So we had a meeting about that. And then after that meeting, she actually produced a couple different like test drawings for here's what I'm thinking, here's the idea, here's what the line art would look like. And like it came back and I was like, yes. I was like, this is awesome and I'm in. So there is a good chance that we will now have illustrations that go with the text that I've written, and we are one step closer to figuring out how to actually publish this thing, which I'm jazzed about. Like I'm really really excited about it.
Very cool. Congratulations.
Yeah, so that's my follow up.
I think I actually made progress on this too, although a little bit accidental.
Okay.
So we talked last time. The topic of my book that I'm going to write is on personal retreats. I have shipped the personal retreat planner,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm very happy with the way that it turned out. I am using it right now to take notes analog as we record because I don't want the clicky keyboard to come through in the background.
Yep.
I also, by the time this goes live on the podcast feed, will have an epic personal retreat video on the YouTube channel.
Okay.
I've I'm going to get the first edit back today as we're recording this, but I talked to my editor yesterday and he said it is at 32 minutes.
Okay. And how do you feel about
So
that? Is that good, bad? Like, do you shoot for a
I
target?
think no, so basically what I did is I condensed my entire personal retreat handbook course
Yeah. Okay.
down into a very tight 32
Yeah.
minute
Okay.
video.
I wasn't thinking of it like
There's
that, but that
no
makes total sense.
there's no fluff in this thing. I scripted the whole thing word for word and ended up being over 6,000 words. So if I took that script and incorporated that into the manuscript for the book, I'm like an eighth to a fourth of the way there.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. There we go. There we go.
Yeah, I don't actually intend to do that, but yeah, I'm starting to distill these ideas. I want to start sharing it in more bite-sized pieces on LinkedIn is the text-based social media platform I'm gonna use for this. And yeah, I feel like those two things though, the planner and then this video, I want this video to be something that I can continue to share for like 5 years,
Oh,
and I
nice.
think it will be. Um so yeah, I feel like I've got the foundation now to really just start talking about this every chance that that I get.
That's awesome. What's your anticipated? I don't remember if you said it or not. When do you think that video will be out? By the time we release this?
Yeah.
Okay.
It should be out within the next week if
Awesome.
you're watching this live. I guess we should mention that we are we talked very briefly about this last time, but we're ripping out the live stream from behind the paywall just because we realize this is more valuable when more people can attend, and more people can attend if we talk about it publicly.
Hmm.
So we're going to start doing that more often, and we're going to try to mention it on all the socials before we go live. But we're also going to try and get these scheduled and share the links to the the stream is coming page, basically, so you can RSVP for it and be notified when we go live.
Yeah. The other plug I'll throw out there for everybody is if you're liking the show, can you like share it on social media, tell people about it, help us out in terms of getting the word out, because we just want to help more people with distilling down ideas in books and talking about them and those kind of things. So if you're willing to do that, that would help us out a ton. So thanks.
Indeed. And we are going to, I think, start getting more sponsors for the show, thanks to the book that you chose for next time.
Yep. Sponsored magnet. Yep.
Yep. I'm looking forward to that one.
Me too.
I don't think we have any more follow-up, though.
No.
You ready to talk about today's book?
I am.
All right. So today's book is Time Anxiety by Chris Guillebeau, who is the person behind the now defunct World Domination Summit conference. Had you ever heard of that or had a chance to go to it perchance?
Only because you've talked about it somewhere. And it wasn't just in relation to this book. Like I've heard you talk about it somewhere in your past of producing content. But other than that, because I'm reading the book thinking, I don't remember what big event he's talking about. I don't remember what big event he's talking about. And I kept forgetting to go look it up. So no,
Yep,
that's all
that
I've
was
heard about it.
The World Domination Summit. It was the conference that when I started getting into the productivity world, that was the one that everybody would go to. And I never got a chance to go. And I kind of regret that. I really wish that I would have bought a ticket. I think the last one was actually the one where Tiago Forte was the keynote speaker, and he talked about building a second brain right before his book came out. But it seemed like a really cool conference, and I know several people who have been to it, and they said that they really enjoyed it. So that's how I know Chris Guillebeau.
Okay.
I think there's another place that people may have heard of Chris Guillebeau, and that is kind of as like the bootstrap startup guy.
$100
So
startup.
I think probably his most successful book, historically, and just the based on the data is the $100 startup, which I think I actually own but have never read.
Okay.
I have lots of startup type books like that, and I just never really got into them. I like the business books,
Mm-hmm.
but for some reason, the startup stuff, that's like that whole world just feels a little bit weird to me. Like, I don't know.
I get it.
So I had no frame of reference for Chris's writing when I went into this, but I was familiar with the topic, familiar with him as a person because he's been around for a long time.
Sure.
The subtitle of this book, The Illusion of Urgency and a Better Way to Live. I feel like this book maybe would not have been, I was going to say appropriate, but I don't think that's the right word. I don't think it would have been received the same way maybe 10 years ago, pre-COVID, let's say.
Okay.
I feel like the world really changed at that point with people working from home, and just people were thinking about time management, productivity differently after that. And he kind of references that in the book a little bit, but it's sort of a time management book, although he would say you really can't manage time. We'll get into that when we get into the meat of the book here. And I think it's really interesting. You were talking about working with an illustrator. This is a very visual book, which I kind of like. It's broken down into 3 different parts. There's an introduction, and then part 1 is breaking the stress cycle. Part 2 is rewriting time rules, and part 3 is owning your time. Then at the very end, there's a 1-page afterword, and the whole thing is about 250 something pages.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of chapters, so we're not going to go chapter by chapter. There's 26 different chapters. I think we'll take it part by part. But what were your first impressions of time anxiety?
Yeah. So my gut impression was like, well, I don't have to worry about time anxiety. Like, I don't have time anxiety. Like, this isn't something that I'm even, it's on my radar. Like, I'm always up for whatever book you're going to offer, right? Because I mean, even if I don't like it, like even if I really, really don't like it, it makes for a fun conversation. So I'm always up for whatever book. But as I looked through this, I was like, well, I don't really think this book is meant for me. Like, I don't really think this is a book that I'm going to really, dig into and kind of get a lot out of. We'll talk about, what I got out of it and kind of how things broke down. But that was my first reaction is, The Illusion of Urgency and a Better Way to Live. That's like the subtitle of it, The Illusion of Urgency and a Better Way to Live. I think I resonated more with the better way to live side than the illusion of urgency. Only because like where I'm at in life right now, it's a grind, but in a good way. Like, so don't read that as it's a grind as in a bad way. It's like, I've got a bunch of kids. I've got a full-time job, like it's just, once the schedule rolls, like it kind of just rolls. Like there is no, like, I mean, it's just going, and it's not that I'm passive in it. It's a matter of right now it's a very kind of like externally dictated schedule, which is just a season of life that I'm in. So that's my take on
Yeah.
what I thought about the book coming in.
Corey's just living the dream.
No, by no means am I told you I was interested in a better way of life. Don't worry about that.
Well, I joke when I say that, but I think that's actually worth unpacking a little bit. Like the goal is to be, in my words, I would say content, but not complacent.
Yeah.
You can't constantly be striving for one day things are going to change for the better and then I'll be happy. But also you can't be satisfied, I think, with just the way things are. So I think the word anxiety here is pretty strong,
Mm-hmm.
but I mean, I shared a couple episodes ago. It's kind of a season for me right now. So I wouldn't say I was actually drawn to the book by that word. However, I think as we get into the book and his definition of this, I get where he's coming from, maybe in a way that I wouldn't have a couple of years ago. You want to jump into the introduction? That's kind of where he talks about some of the big ideas here.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so the introduction is where he defines time anxiety, which is the fear of time running out. And I think this is something that everybody can relate to. He talks about the two kinds of time anxiety: existential, which is time is running out in my life, and then the daily routine, where there's not enough time in the day. And I have sort of come to peace with the existential part of this.
Okay, so good. I just, for those of you who aren't watching the live stream, I just did a fist pump because I'm in the same boat. Like, I'm okay with the existential part of it, the day-to-day stuff. But go ahead, I cut you off.
Yeah. So we talked, that's sort of the whole idea behind the personal retreat stuff, is to create the alignment between these things so we can make the most progress in the day-to-day for the things that really matter. But I do think that there is there's still a lot of noise in my day-to-day. So I think that's the one out of those two that speaks to me the most. He talks about the three different dimensions, which is the past, I wish I'd done things differently; the present, I don't know what to do right now; and then the future, I'm worried about what will happen in the days and years to come. I don't know that it's kind of interesting to think about that from the three different perspectives, but I kind of don't know what you do with that either. It's not like, okay, well, the present daily, that's the one I really got to focus on. I think he's just trying to help you understand the different facets of this. And then the other thing that's really important, I think, from this introduction is a quote that he shares, that it's hard to overstate how deeply rooted the gospel of efficiency is in Western culture. I saw you message about this. You actually grabbed like the little highlight, shared this on social. So I know this resonated with you. What do you think of this?
Yeah, so I've read a different individual who wrote a book called The Technological Society, and Jacques Ellul. And it's basically about this idea of efficiency and how we've gone into this mode where we're really just all about efficiency. We're really all about like, how do we increase in productivity? How do we do more? How do we, achieve more? How do we do all this stuff? and we like miss the trees through the forest, right? Like we're all about that thing, and we don't like experience the internal moment. And this is where like you talk about the daily versus the existential thing. Like I will get so laser focused on not even like a specific thing, like, but like doing more, the idea of doing more, the idea of achieving more, the idea to where it's like I miss the wonderful, beautiful moments of the day to day. And like this is a problem that I have, that I've known that I had. I mean, I used to struggle with it in terms of like, what is the next plan for the next 3 years? What is the next plan for the next 5 years? You know, and I was always focused on the next, the next, the next, the next. And now it's more a matter of like I find myself, I don't want to say not enjoying. That sounds too negative, right? But I find myself getting to the end of the day and kind of like going, what just happened? Like where did the day go? But all I focus on is like, but I didn't do enough. Like there should have been more that I accomplished today, and I didn't do enough. So that's like the underlying. If I'm unpacking all of that, the other one that I want to call out here is like I felt so seen in this introductory chapter. So I told you I wasn't like super jazzed about this book, but I felt so seen in this introductory chapter. If you're like me, is how he starts this paragraph. If you're like me, you tend to get excited about a new habit or a method and try it out for a while, but it doesn't really stick. So you try something else. And the same thing happens. More apps, more journals, more promises to fix everything once and for all. A promise that sets itself up for inevitable failure. And I was like, oh my gosh, welcome into the window of me and the idea of tools and tips and tricks and productivity. And I was just like, I felt seen at the same time. I felt incredibly bad during reading that paragraph. So I mean, I really like the way he sets this up. You know, I'm in the boat that you are in, not really worried about the existential piece as much as the day to day, and then the trying, but for what reason? Like, do I know what I'm trying for? And that was the challenge of this intro for me.
Yep. Cool. Well, let's go into part 1, which is breaking the stress cycle. There are 9 chapters here. So I want to just real briefly mention these. And then like I said, I don't want to go through all of them. I got a couple ideas I want to unpack. Chapter 1 is start by giving yourself more time. I think that's actually a great place to start. It's like a quick win. Chapter 2 is cognitive distortions. That's one that's interesting, and I want to talk about. Chapter 3 is time blindness hinders your sense of time. Chapter 4, unlearning. Chapter 5, time rules exist to serve you. You don't exist to serve time rules. Chapter 6, the inbox of shame. Chapter 7, the magical thinking of time management. Chapter 8, what is enough. Chapter 9, do things poorly. So, I mean, these chapters are short, and there's essentially one big idea from each of these, which is good. You know, I mentioned the chapter 1 is a good place to start because it gives you some quick wins. He talks about before you can make big decisions about your life, you need to reduce the immediate pressure you feel. And he talks about anxiety actually here. So I guess maybe I do want to talk about this one. Anxiety inhibits your ability to think clearly in the moment. So that's important to recognize. And I think it actually strengthens the title of this book and the case that he's making for this concept called time anxiety. But chapter 2, the cognitive distortions, this is the one that I feel like I am currently struggling with the most. So he talks about these cognitive distortions as irrational or exaggerated thought patterns that can perpetuate the state of time anxiety. And one of them specifically that he calls out, now there's lots of these that we could be talking about, but catastrophizing. This is the one that that I jotted down, which is expecting the worst possible outcome in a situation or viewing an event as more dangerous than it really is. I mean, I just went through a launch, so there are definitely things that happen during a launch, not just the specific launch. It's part of the launch process where you're like, I hadn't planned on dropping everything and putting out this urgent fire, but here we are. We need to do this. So I have to deal with that stuff. But then I also noticed as I was reading this book, going through this stuff at the same time, I have a tendency to let that bleed over. So just because that happened as part of the launch, which again is not an unknown problem, that's part of the launch process. I get that. but now I'm applying it to other things. And I
Yeah.
have to catch myself. And it's like, what are you doing? Because every single, text message that comes in then is like, oh my gosh, what do we got to do with this? And going from 0 to 60 real fast.
Yeah, I think mine coming out of this first part were unlearning. And I think what happened is when I was younger and in my like 20s or whatever, I would do certain things based on necessity. So it's like I would procrastinate based on necessity, and then I got into this habit of like, oh, okay, well, I need that pressure to in order to get things done. And it's like, no, you would actually do much better if you didn't have that pressure and you actually did things more weeks in ahead, right, and slowly kind of picked at it and put it together. But I need to unlearn that idea. Like I need to unlearn the kind of the behavioral habit of doing that. So like that was a big one that came out of this for me. Another one is the idea of what is enough. And like what I struggle with on this one is I have this cognitive dissonance of like, oh yeah, but I could do more. And the answer is like,
Hmm.
yes, you could. You can always do more, but is it enough? Like, is it good enough to then push and go forward? And is it gold plating? Like, so we in the project management world, we would call this gold plating, right? Where you've met the objective or you've met your scope of work, and then you add on to that, right? You plate the thing in gold when really the client didn't ask you to plate it in gold. Like they don't care that it was plated in gold because that doesn't add any value to them. And this is what I struggle with is like I don't know, perfectionism is probably not the right word because I do not think I'm a perfectionist by any means, but it's like this idea of, oh, it needs to be a little bit better. And it's like, no, it probably doesn't. So I think unlearning and that what is enough tie together for me is like there are some of those things that I have to unlearn, but it's hard, right? Like it's hard to
Yep.
unlearn some of those things. There's another section, I don't remember exactly where it is, but he talks about suffering. Do you remember where this is?
Yeah. But before we go on to that, though,
Okay.
I want to, you mentioned the what is enough piece.
Yeah.
And that also spoke to me. One of my action items from this section what comes from that chapter where he talks about deciding that that's enough work for today and building in fun time. And the specific action item is don't save all your fun time for the weekend.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That was, I mean, that's not the first time I've heard that, but when I read it, I was like, oh yeah, I could totally do
Yeah.
that.
Yep.
And then the unlearning piece, I agree. This is also an important thing. He describes or defines unlearning as a deliberate process of discarding previously acquired knowledge, beliefs, or behaviors. So it's not the same thing as forgetting. That's passive. Unlearning is active.
Mm-hmm.
There is a quote that he has in this book, though, which is relevant to a discussion that we had already earlier,
Okay.
and that is that there is nothing wrong with audiobooks.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
We brought this up in the pro show. We were talking about working with ideas, essentially. I think I agree with him on this, and I wanted to just call this out real quickly, but he's not viewing audiobooks as I'm going to complete this book in order to mine as much potential idea seeds as possible. He makes the other point in this chapter that there's so many books out there, so many good books. You'll never read all the ones that you really want to read. So if something's not doing it for you, you should feel free to just chuck it. And so I think if you are viewing a book that way, as I'm not going to read it unless I listen to it, then go ahead and listen to it. That's totally fine. I don't think I would read quote unquote an audiobook for Bookworm because I personally would not retain nearly as much information from it.
Yeah.
But I think it's interesting, picking the things that you want to actually invest in and then recognizing that there are going to be things that you were useful at one point and you no longer need them. And being active about the process of, okay, that was useful for a time, but I'm going to change my thinking about something and I'm going to go find something that is going to help me think about the current state of my life in a new and potentially better, more useful way.
Yeah, you talked about the audio thing. I think unless you're doing something in addition to that, where you're really gleaning things out of that. But I've found, I mean, without a doubt, if I'm just like passively just letting it run in the background, oh man, I'm not retaining any of that. Like there might be like one or two things I get out of the entire book, and I think to myself like,
Mm-hmm.
why? And that's why I'll do a lot of audiobooks with fiction. But if I'm like listening and reading, or listening and taking notes, like actually detailed notes while I'm doing it, then I get more out of it. One of the last things I want to do out of this first part is I loved the Sylvia Plath fig tree story. So
Mm-hmm.
basically, it's you're the narrator sitting under a fig tree, and there are all these juicy, delicious figs, and and he describes like what they might be for you. Like they're this thing, this thing, and overwhelmed, the narrator is unable to choose which one to pick. Right, so they don't pick any of them. So they don't, and then finally when they realize like I'm gonna pick one, they realize that all of the figs have gone bad and they've fallen to the ground. And like again, this one just hit home. It's like in my brain there's all these different ideas that are like rolling around that I think would be cool, and I think would be good, and I think would be cool, and I'm like, nah, not yet. No, don't do that. No, that's gonna be too much work. No, it's not the right time. And like I'm worried. So this is where like again, I don't know if it's time anxiety or it's some sort of anxiety. I'm worried that I'm going to get 10 years down the road and go, well, you didn't do any of that. Like you had these really
Mm-hmm.
cool ideas and you didn't do any of it because you just sat on your hands too long. And all of these possible options were there. And I don't know what to do with that. Like I don't know how to resolve that. And I know like essentially the rest of this book is trying to help you with that. But I didn't come out of the book going, oh, I have that one thing I need to do to resolve that. And I feel like frustrated, I guess, if I'm if I'm, it felt more like little pieces that might help that, but there's not this one thing
Yeah.
that's like, this is what you do to help that out. So, but I really like the analogy because I think it's a very apt analogy.
Yeah, it would be easier for sure if someone would just tell you this is the most important thing in
This is
your
your,
life. Just go do this.
here's your fig, Mike, right? Like go, there's your fig. Go get it,
Yeah, I get it. He mentions the time rules. I think we should real briefly describe what these are.
Okay.
They're basically cultural rules that are implicit and we just sort of assume and apply to our lives. So, one of the time rules that he mentions is punctuality, and that is a Western time rule. And I have an example of that. I don't know that this is really exactly what he was talking about, but I remember when I went to on the mission trip that I went to Costa Rica,
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of shocked at how they don't really pay attention to time. It's like,
Fuzzy
we're going
time.
to go do this thing at this place this morning,
Yep.
and
It's
people will just
it's very
slowly show up.
very fuzzy. Yes, it's very fuzzy time. Yep.
Yeah, so that's what I thought of when you mentioned the time rule of punctuality, but totally this applies to me, and I recognize that, and I kind of don't really love it. I think there's even pockets of this within like where we live. So I recognize I'm recording this currently. I'm up in Door County with my mom and dad for the weekend, and I like coming up here because, especially in the winter, because everything just kind of shuts down and it feels like it just moves at a slower pace. And when I go back home, it's only 2 hours away, but it just feels much different when you are in that setting. And we don't live in a big city where there's, it's not Appleton is not New York City where people are moving a mile a minute all the time. But even in that scenario, I noticed the difference. And I think the real important thing here is we should apply these time rules in a way that help us. He talks about time rules work well with habit stacking, but just really just I don't have an action item specifically associated with this, but I think the general advice is to consider what sort of time rules you've been playing by, either intentionally or unintentionally, and then figure out if you want to change the rules of engagement with those.
Yeah. Mike, what's your take on in chapter 9 he talks about doing things poorly, and the goal, like I think it's a bad title for the chapter because he's basically
Hmm.
not saying do things poorly. He's saying don't let greatness prevent you from doing a thing. Like that's the way I,
Yeah.
process at the end of that chapter. It's like, just get some stuff done, which we've talked about this with daily pages, or morning pages or whatever they call them, where like the goal is to just get words on paper. The goal is not to make the best, most beautiful prose in the world.
Yep.
I like this, right? I think this is a good thing. But at the same time that, as I've heard people talk about it, and as you and I have talked about it in the past, there does come a point where like you have to cross the Rubicon of like, okay, I've done things
Yep.
poorly for so long, and now I actually need to start thinking about quality. I need to start thinking about like making it better, and I need to start thinking about improving. So that I kind of gave you my take on it. It's like, yes,
Yeah.
that's good when you're first getting started, but then if you're serious about it, like I do think we need to move beyond that somewhat quickly.
Well, this chapter I actually did really enjoy. I recently published a newsletter slash blog post. I put a link in the show notes called "Cranking versus Creating,"
Okay.
and it's really about overcoming perfectionism, which is the topic of this chapter as well. And he makes the point that many things are perfectly fine if they're good enough, right? So that is really the thing to keep in mind is it really worth stressing about how good this thing could really be? But even if you really want something to be really good over a period of time, I would argue the way to get there is actually by shipping a bunch of stuff. So the quantity actually produces the quality. So I think actually the do things poorly, there's a lot of ways that you can apply this, but I think you should actually create a bunch of stuff if you really want to do something well. My first podcast episode that I released, it was Zach and I talking. It was an episode of the productivity show. It was a 15-minute episode, and I think I spent like 8 hours editing it because I was editing out every ah and every
Mm-hmm,
and I
mm-hmm.
realized how bad I was at public speaking.
Yeah.
And I joined a Toastmasters group as a result of that. I never would have gotten to that point though until I stepped out there and did it.
Yeah.
And then even after I published the episode, or not after I published it, because I got done editing and I remember thinking this sounds bland and sterile because I made it perfect.
Mm-hmm.
I spent all this time and effort making this thing perfect, and really you have to put in a bunch of reps. Now that I've published thousands of podcast episodes, I know I have a much better picture of what a good one looks like.
Yeah.
So there's differences though, between cranking and creating. And I think if you're just going to do things poorly to ship it, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to get to the point where you are meeting the quality bar. So in the blog post, I kind of break these apart. They both have the attitude of, well, let's just ship it. But 10,000 hours of practice doesn't necessarily make you a master. It's the deliberate practice. You got to be intentional about it. So when you are cranking, it's simply, I got to get this thing done. And I think that could apply to what Chris is talking about in this chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just get this thing done. It's not worth worrying about. But if you are wanting to create something, really you're not focused on just clear the task and get to the next item on the list, but it's throw the thing out there and then get the feedback. And then you incorporate that feedback. You don't even have to have a formal process for it, but you have to have those feedback loops and you have to learn something from the thing. And that real question to be answered there is, do I care enough about this to put in the time to learn from it? That's where I think the do things poorly, could go a couple different directions. But
I think if you look at, you talked at the very beginning, there's 26 chapters in this book, so there's a lot of like small little chunks. I typically don't like books that are like this. I'm learning that. Like, this is something I've learned from doing Bookworm, is like, I don't like the little bit of chunks, kind of books. But if you look back at his part 1, right, and you remember the title of part 1, it's Breaking the Stress Cycle. And then you look down through here, I actually think he does a really good job at like identifying, I won't say all, but a lot of these really key components that cause stress when we think about time, right? Like the one that like kind of stands out because it's so specific, like compared to the other ones, is the email one. But like, I understand why you put it in there, because I think for a lot of people that one is a huge stressor. And you think about, I mean, I can go into the email and just burn 3, 4, 5, 6 hours just clicking, like, and doing silly things. But otherwise, like if you look at the core concepts I think he has in here, I think he did a really good job thinking about essential ones that cause us to stress out in the idea of time. So I think kudos to him on part 1, even though it has 9 chapters, being irrelevant. Those 9 chapters are relevant.
Yeah, absolutely. One other big idea, which we just need to mention here, is that time keeps advancing. It cannot be managed. That comes from chapter 7, the
Mm-hmm.
magical thinking of time management. I think this is 100% true.
Yeah.
So he actually says, there's no such thing as time management, which sounds contradictory on the surface. What do you mean? There's so many books that have been written on the concept of time management. But since time keeps advancing, really what we should be managing is our energy and our attention. You can't boss time around. I think that is the way that he frames it, I think is really powerful. I think it's a revolutionary idea if you really grok what he's saying there. And that kind of leads into the next part. So I just want to mention that before we move on. Anything else from part 1?
Nope. I'm feeling good.
All right. So let's go to part 2, which is rewriting time rules. And again, bunch of chapters here. Chapter 10, our perception of time changes as we age. Chapter 11, use rules of engagement to decide between competing requests. Chapter 12, be right back. I'm just going to disappear and never return. Chapter 13, move on quickly. Chapter 14, not finishing things is one of the great joys in life. Chapter 15, knitting is good for you. Chapter 16, the traffic light model of focus and fatigue. And chapter 17, sometimes a light schedule is harder than a full one. There's a lot of stuff in here. I guess I'll just jump straight to chapter 15, and then we can go wherever you want with this. But
we're on the same page today, Mike, because that's where I wanted to start too. So I'm really happy you started there. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, it's weird because this is kind of a minor thing, but the knitting is good for you. He talks about cozy hobbies and how they can lower your anxiety. Knitting, crafting, mentions board games.
Granny hobbies. He calls them granny hobbies, which is such a weird way to name it.
That's the next thing.
Oh,
so
okay,
first he says cozy hobbies, but then cozy granny hobbies are low intensity, easy to pick up or put down. He kind of uses them interchangeably. So yeah, I kind of was looking I want to make a single node here with the definition, but I really couldn't because he defined cozy hobbies a specific way. Then he talked about cozy granny hobbies. And I think granny hobbies is really the place that he's trying to get to at the end there. But the thing that really stands out to me from this is a quote about the different modes. Okay. And it reminded me of something that Sean Blanc said a long time ago, which I thought was brilliant. And I wanted to bring it up here and use this as the jumping off point for our granny hobbies.
Okay.
He said that if you work with your head, you should rest with your hands. Now that is kind of hard for me because I'm not a very handy guy. Like Sean creates stuff. He creates stuff, he writes, and then he goes into the wood shop and he planes a board or something. David Sparks does the same thing.
You're surrounded by these wood shop people. Like, what's wrong with?
I know. I
don't mess with a wood shop, so you're good, Mike. Like, you're good.
I have zero interest in it.
Me either.
I remember we even actually looked at a house, which was, we were moving to the town that we live in at the time, and we had a small family. We didn't have a ton of money, so it was like $150,000 house. But it had this wood shop with this vacuum system, and the guy who's for sale by owner showing it to us, he's all proud of this, and I'm like, cool, but I don't care.
Yep.
I think I have different versions of this. I think this is where running comes in for me.
Okay.
But that's not really a cozy granny hobby.
No. So I would agree with you on this too. I love the idea, and what I wanted to call out the fact that granny hobbies, I just think the phrasing of it is hilarious, right? But I get what he's saying, and where you hit the nail on the head is the idea of when we work with our minds, we rest with our hands. And I would say bodies, like I would generalize that out to bodies, is something more physical, something more tangible is the wrong way to put it, because you're producing tangible things when you're writing and, and making videos and all that other stuff. But I teach. So mostly what I do is I figure out ways to communicate knowledge and ways to help students learn knowledge. Well, that's not a very tangible thing. It's a very mental exercise. So I need to then balance that out with, and I'm like you, like my balance out is I go for a run, I climb a mountain, I lift something heavy, and it's only because there's this weird energy that like dissipates when I do those things, that I can't dissipate it in any other way. I think if I was going to pick, again, it's not a granny hobby, but if I was going to pick one of those hobbies that he's describing, it wouldn't be knitting, it wouldn't be woodworking. The closest thing I could get to that would be like leather work. I think that would be cool. But then I look at like what's produced in the leatherwork world and I'm like, it's okay. Like I'm not really that jazzed about it. So I do like some 3D printing type stuff and I like to play around with that. But I think mine would be the idea of having a car, like, or like, okay, so here's one that I've wanted to do, right? I really think this would be a fun thing to do. I want to convert some old car into an electric vehicle. I don't know why.
Okay.
Like it just seems like a fun, use your hands, make a tangible thing hobby. Do you know why I don't do it, Mike? It's like the most cost wasting thing that you've ever done in your life, because old cars weren't meant to be electric cars. So you're going to pay like triple, quadruple what you would be if you just went out and bought an electric car, right? Like just go buy the electric car. But like the idea of the project is what excites me. Like me going out to with the boys and just kind of cranking on making that old car electric. But it's like, I like this idea and I think there's something there. It's just figuring out what it is. So this is where my first action item comes in. My first action item is basically what is going to be, or what might be, my go-to physical body thing that is not just random working out. I'm okay with random working out, but I want something else. Is it playing a guitar? Is it learning the piano? Like there's got to be something else that is there, and I just don't know what that is. So that's going to be my first action item out of this book, is to think about that.
All right. I like it. I don't know what my granny hobby is going to be. He mentioned board games specifically. I kind of do that, but not as much as we used to. When everything got shut down for COVID, we bought a board game table because we were playing board games every single night. I would kind of like to get back into a rhythm like that, but I just don't know how feasible that is with kids being older. I mean, it's soccer season for us. I coach middle school, and we frequently have to be in 3 different places at the same time.
Exactly. Yep. Yeah, that makes
3 different teams. So yeah, I don't really know. I don't really know what to do with that, but I'm going to continue to think about it. I think I can probably land on something. It's definitely not going to be knitting. I have no idea what it's going to be.
Yeah.
I'm going to continue running. I do love running. That is my escape mechanism, I guess.
Yeah.
So one of the things that stood out to me from this section is chapter 12. The title we laughed at, "Be right back, I'm just going to disappear and never return."
Mm-hmm.
But I have felt this recently. He says that logically illogical human behaviors are responses to cognitive distortions. And I can totally see how those play out. Mentions that avoiding hard things doesn't help, but it feels good. And then he has the flip side of that, which is that staying busy often is a form of avoidance. So I think there's a lot of self reflection that needs to happen for really anybody who reads this, but I'm going to say it for me specifically, and figure out, where am I avoiding doing the things that really matter? Because it could be, this thing I really should do and I keep putting it off because it feels like a heavy lift. But also it could be, that there are things that I am doing which are distractions from the thing that I should really be doing, and I'm doing all those things to make myself feel better. That's uncomfortable, but I think I gotta think about that. And the action item specifically here is to make a list of the things that I am putting off.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good first step.
I'm a little bit worried at how long this list might be, but
Yep. I really like this section too, and it's, especially when he brings in the point that like the amount of mental and emotional energy that avoiding something takes, I think is way bigger than we think it is. Like I don't want to have that talk with important person X, whoever it might be. So like I'll go to all of these great lengths to not do that. Mike, do you want to know what my avoidance activities is? One of my key avoidance activities? I'll check my email. And I'll organize my email inbox, right? Because it feels like
organizing the deck chairs on the Titanic.
because it feels like I'm doing something, right? Valuable. Really, I know in my heart of hearts, I am not doing anything valuable. All I'm doing is avoiding the thing that I don't want to do, that I should be doing and that I don't want to do. And I just think that this is a very, very like a nail on the head kind of a point. Like I think it's a nail on the
Yeah.
head. Like what are you doing to avoid the thing you should be doing? But I like your action item, right? Like make a list of the things I'm putting off. And then I think your extension of this would be, what do I do to avoid doing that thing? Like what is my default go to? And this is where I think social media bites people. So like you feel like you're learning, you feel like you're engaging with people, you feel like you're having these relationships via social media, and it's like you're not. You're really just avoiding all the things you don't want to do. And it's just easier
Yeah.
to flip, and scroll. So I really thought this was a valuable chapter as you think through this.
Yeah. So the topic of social media, by the way, I really don't like the term social media because it's in a lot of ways very antisocial.
Yeah, yeah.
But I also find myself being drawn more to it from a business perspective. So I mentioned LinkedIn and I want to show up more there, but it has nothing to do with scratching a social itch. It's really just because I want to use it to build
Well,
my business.
it's where everybody is, right? Like if I'm gonna make a message that I want people to see, there's two places I should do that: an email list that I've developed and I've grown, and social media. Like those are the two
Hmm.
places at this point. You don't send a flyer anymore. You don't like you don't put a sign up in the sky. Like I mean, those are the two places. So it's like a love hate thing for me. Like I know the value of it, and I hate engaging with it. Like I don't want to be part of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
um, the other big idea, I think, from this chapter or this section, chapter 17, about the light schedule being harder than a full one. That sounds ridiculous when you just read it, but I think it is true because the point is that if you have a light schedule, you sometimes feel bad about not being productive. You're not getting everything done that you think you can get done or you should get done. And he mentions, especially if you are newly self employed. So I definitely have fallen into this.
Mm-hmm.
But he also talks about we have a natural limit for our daily productive hours. You can't simply ramp up your productive time. We've mentioned this before, but I think it's worth calling out again. Most people can only do 3 or 4 hours of focused work per day. So if you're starting your own business and you're like, finally, I don't have any of these meetings, I'm going to crush it. You are going to be crushed to find out that you can't crush it.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
You're going
Yep.
to hit a wall. But the big point here is to learn to manage yourself and not your time. I think this is a very simple idea that is very, very powerful. And I mean, essentially it's diluted throughout the rest of the book. Like he really, I think, could hammer that message home a lot harder and stronger than he does. And it's really potentially life-changing if you understand it, but it's not in your face. We'll talk about that when we get to style and rating, I think. But I want to call it out here because I think this is the thing that could totally change your life if you
Mm-hmm.
really applied this idea or this principle.
Yeah. I get an action item out of this section. Basically, I don't get to control my schedule. I mean, I do a little bit, but I don't get to control my schedule during the semester. So at any given time, it's like, oh, you're going to teach this class, then this class, then this class, then. And it's balanced with a bunch of the other schedule requirements and classroom openings and all these things. So it's not uncommon for me to have like an 8 a.m. class, a 2 hour break, and then, another class, and then an hour break, and then another class. And what I find is I'm really not good, I guess, for lack of a more formal way to say that. I'm not good at being productive in those pockets. Like those pockets for me, and by no means do I think I need to like wall to wall make that 100% productive time. But like I find myself at the end of the day looking back and going like, oh, I should have worked on this thing during that time. And I've tried, the block scheduling where it's like, oh, I get done with that class and I'm going to work on this project. And I get done with that class and I'm going to work on this thing. But like that, I mean, it barely ever stays true, right? Like it barely ever where
Hmm.
it's like I get done with that, and sometimes it's a like I don't feel like working on that. Like I don't have the brain power right now. Something happened in my first class, or I don't have the brain power. Sometimes it's a matter of something gets in the way, and a student wants to meet for an extra half hour, or and then talk about something. And I I'm getting to my action item. The action item is like, how do I adjust myself and or something to actually make those pockets productive? Like I would love it if I could control my schedule and the first 4 hours of the morning is like, nope, you're not getting that. Like that's mine. I'm gonna do what I want to do when my brain is the most fresh. Yada yada. I can't do that though. Like that's not
Hmm.
realistic. I have to work in the schedule where these pockets of time, and how do I do that? And like that's what I need to figure out. So my official action item is how do I make the pockets in my schedule more productive? And then I put in parentheses with the things I want to do. Not just productive for the like the raw sense of productivity, but with the things I actually want to accomplish. And that's a hard one for
Yeah.
me to think through.
What do you think about the traffic light strategy for focus?
I was not a fan. I was not a fan of the traffic
Yeah.
light thing. Like he could have gotten rid of that chapter, and I'd have been totally fine.
Yeah. So real briefly, the traffic light strategy, green is your state of flow or hyper focus, yellow is approaching a danger zone, showing signs of fatigue or overwork. And then red is you've reached your limit, you need to stop, you need to rest, you need to recover. Talks about the link between hyper focus and burnout. I feel like there's a compelling argument and an important point to be made here, but I agree that the framework of the traffic light doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. I feel like the flow or the hyper focus that he's talking about, that is ideal, but that's not something that you're in for 3 4 hours a day. And then there's got to be something in between there for I'm still being productive, but I'm not just absolutely crushing it, Gary V style.
Mm-hmm.
And yellow, like, that makes sense, slow down. And you have to recognize that your energy is going to ebb and flow. I agree with that. He mentions here that we overestimate what we can get done in the short term, underestimate what we can get done in the long term. Agree with that, but the application of it feels a little bit fuzzy.
Yeah, and if I'm remembering correctly, didn't he get this analogy from somebody else, and he was like, "Oh, that's a good one. We're going to use this."
Possibly.
I'm pretty sure it
Yeah, I
was
don't
this one.
know.
But I like the idea of focus, burnout, like these type of things. I think it's a good way to talk about it. I did not like the packaging of the red, yellow, green at all. It just didn't resonate with me at all. So I'll stop there. But
Yeah, I agree. One other thing that did resonate with me all the way back at the beginning chapter was how we plan our days is how we plan our lives, and our perception of that's the chapter about our perception of time changes as we age. But there was a description of a time-free zone that he used here, which I think is really interesting. It's basically a portion of your day where you are not thinking about what time it is. I think this is fascinating. I have an action item to create a time-free zone where I don't care about time. I have no idea how in the world I'm going to be able to do that,
nice.
but I think it's a really cool concept, and I can definitely see it being valuable if I'm able to pull it off.
Well, it's almost like what you're describing about when you go to Door County, right? Is there's this it's essentially your time-free zone. So it's like that physical removal allows you to exist in a world where you don't care quite as much about the individual time and the individual schedule. That's
Kind
a
of,
very, very
yeah. So I want to be able to hopefully create that in my day to day, but
yeah.
we will see.
Yep. Let me see if there's anything else. I don't think I have anything else on this in this part two.
Okay, so part 3 is owning your time. This is just based on the title, kind of where the payoff is. Again, a bunch of chapters. Chapter 18, the movie of your life. That's an interesting idea. Chapter 19, the real problem is we're going to die. Chapter 12, hold on to that feeling. Sorry, chapter 20. Chapter 21, how we respond to regret is more important than avoiding it. Chapter 22, the eighth day of the week. Chapter 23, planning for a year is easier than planning for a day. Chapter 24, weddings, holidays, and other depressing events. Chapter 25, pay yourself first. Chapter 26, instead of leaving a legacy, learn to live well. There's a couple really interesting things in this chapter. I think maybe let's start with chapter 24, weddings, holidays, and other depressing events. I don't know how you feel about these, but I actually have experienced this. I think he's onto something with this this chapter. I guess I'm curious what you think
Okay.
about this. His big idea really is just like we're expected to feel happy about these big life events. And then we get to these like holidays and these events that we're like, oh, I finally have time off and it's going to be great. And then it doesn't go the way we think it will. And we get frustrated.
Yeah. So I'm going to let you down here, Mike. I did not resonate with this chapter at all. Right. And I don't
That's
know
fine.
if
That's fine.
I don't know if I'm just like completely disconnected from this idea, of basically I would agree with you that time he says in here time is weird during the holiday season. It's
Hmm.
like we're in a time warp. I agree with that, but I think that's a positive. Like I like that. Like when I go to the holiday season, like everything is like different. The routine is different. I don't know what's wrong with my brain, but I'm like, yeah, like we're in a weird time where like nobody like it's just nice. It's different. So like
Well,
that doesn't
I think there's a couple things here which you can chime in, and I want to know if these factors maybe go into your feeling that way. So, college professor, right? You have
Yep.
an extended break over the holidays. What is it, like a month?
Yeah, for us it's about a month, 3 weeks to a month depending on the year. Yep.
Okay, so I think most people probably take off the week between Christmas and New Year's,
Hmm.
and the months leading up to that, I'm speaking generally, but I think most people are like, well, yeah, let's just get together, during the break. And so you sort of make all these commitments about these things that you're going to do over the break. And then you gets to the break and you just need a break. And you feel like, I just need to stop, not do anything for several days.
Ding 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 ding. So for those of you who aren't teachers and or college professors, one of the crazy things that is hard to explain to somebody until you go through it, and the reason why I know that most people would experience this is because we'll get affiliate faculty members and they'll run the semester and they'll like get to the end of the semester and they'll be like, oh my gosh, I'm absolutely fried. Like I am toast. I've got nothing left, kind of a thing. Well, they're usually teaching like one class, right? So most of the teachers and or faculty, like full-time faculty members, we're teaching like 4 or 5, right? So like, I mean, turn that dial up to 11 and that's what we're feeling. So by the time we hit the first week of December, I am gone. Like I am like totally fried, totally toast. And when that time warp happens, it's such a relief. So yes, Mike, my whole point in saying all that is you're absolutely right. The context of my everyday life is very different, which changes my view of this chapter.
Yeah, but also I don't know that I 100% agree with this chapter. I think the feeling that he's calling out there is actually important to recognize, but he mentions that projects during the holidays can keep you grounded. I'm not sure I want to do a project over the break. At first I was, oh yeah, that's brilliant. I'm totally going to do that. And the more I think about it, I'm like, nah. I think the bigger point and the one I want to think about is he mentions that many of life's truly special events are ordinary or unexpected. So I don't want to keep putting off, oh, we're going to make these memories or we're going to do these things at these specific
Mm-hmm.
times at the end
Mm-hmm.
of the year or during these holidays like Christmas and Easter, etc. I want to figure out how to build that into the regular rhythms, but not necessarily having a what you call it, action item associated with that. Another one I want to talk about though is chapter 20. Hold on to that feeling, because he's talking about aliveness in this chapter, and how things don't need to have utility in order to make you happy. And he kind of admonishes us to pay close attention to the moments when you feel more alive than usual. Do you know where I'm going to go with this?
I don't. So I'm very intrigued. I'm very intrigued.
Okay, well, I like this because this is essentially the first part of the life theme process.
Okay.
The
Okay.
first step that I walk people through in that cohort is identifying your moments of impact, is what I call them. So I think I maybe bristle a little bit at the term happy, because when I think about moments of impact, I'm thinking about things where you really just feel that made a
Yeah.
difference, right? And sometimes those are the most difficult things that you go through, and you go through them and you're just like, oh my gosh, I made it through. That was awesome. Like I remember public speaking was that for me. I was terrified of it at the beginning, but the very first time I spoke in front of an audience and I could see the feedback I was getting from people as
Mm-hmm.
I was
Mm-hmm.
speaking, I'm like, oh, this is so much better.
Yeah. So let me encourage you here. I think the phrase is the alive. language that he uses is much better than the happy language that he uses, because
Yes,
there are these
yes.
experiences where you walk out of it and you're just like, oh my gosh, like, yeah, like I'm gonna go run through a brick wall, right? Like this was amazing. And I agree with that. I do not agree with the happy. Like, if we're gonna go with the times when I felt most happy, I think that's too fickle. I think that's really too fickle. So I want to encourage you there.
No, I agree with that, and I also think, the whole point of the chapter is not just to do the things that make you happy, but basically he's saying that you don't have to always do the things that you think are quote unquote productive.
Mm-hmm.
There doesn't have to be utility associated with the things that you do. You don't have to get to the end of the day and feel like, there, I have cranked so many widgets,
Yep.
therefore it has been a good day. Like, sometimes just do the things that bring you life. So I really do like that term aliveness, because that's one of the clarifying questions I give people is, when did you feel most alive?
Yeah.
And that's the first time I've heard somebody talk about that piece of the life theme process. I think I've read a lot of books, and we've talked about the personal mission statements and distilling things down, personal core values. Like, those themes appear a lot of different places, but those moments of aliveness, I like the way that he described those.
And this is where I like where his distinction between feel good productivity, right? Like, there's a difference, because feel good productivity is still like the idea of being productive, and feeling good or being alive, like, while you're doing that. But like, I like what he says here is like, there's going to be some things where it's like you're not productive and you leave that feeling like alive. Like, you and I, Mike, we're going to go get coffee. And the whole point of that is for us to sit in the room and just drink coffee. We're not productive on any level. We are just hanging out, talking about stuff. It might be important stuff, it might not be important stuff. And like that, give yourself the space, or give yourself the permission. I don't know what word you want to say, to do that stuff. Now, granted, you can't do it all the time, but like, giving yourself the permission or the space to do that is, I think, a really, really valuable thing. I think where this chapter goes wrong is when people interpret it, like when they read it and they go, well, the only things I should do are the things that make me feel alive. And I'm like,
Yeah.
that like let me know how that goes for you, because there's a lot of stuff I have to do in daily life where I do not feel alive. Like, I am not excited. I'm not jazzed about that. I walk out exhausted, but I had to do that because I'm a dad, I'm a husband. I have to make, like,
Yeah.
money. Like, I just have to do some stuff, so I think that's where this chapter potentially goes wrong, but I don't think he led us there at all. I think it's potentially in the interpretation of the way you use it.
Yeah, I mean, the larger point here, I think, is kind of what you're talking about with things you don't want to do, right? So those aren't things that make you happy, and kind of the traditional description of that would be like, follow your passion, which is a terrible idea, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Until you
yeah.
realize what passion really means, which is the
To
root of the
suffer.
word passion is pati. Yeah, it means to suffer. So really, what's so important that you're willing to go through some stuff in order to see it come about? Kind of changes the equation there. He sort of hints on that in this section. I think the first two chapters kind of go together. The movie of your life. This is really just recognizing that your life is like a movie, and in a movie you've got story arcs and different things. There's conflict that's happening, and recognizing that you're going to get through it. I think that's really important. He uses the phrase "the best is yet to come." I mean, simple phrase, but that really spoke to me when I read that. And then chapter 19, the real problem is we're going to die. This is sort of getting at the idea of memento mori, but there's a very specific strategy in here that I actually kind of liked.
Okay.
Memento mori, by the way, this is the Roman thing where when a war general came back, they had someone who was, as he's going through the parades through this city streets, there's someone whispering in his ear, remember, you're going to die someday. So that's essentially memento mori. I built that into my Obsidian daily note. I actually have like a little progress bar for my life based on the average 80-year lifespan,
Yep.
which some people think is depressing, but I actually think it helps you redeem the time and make best use of it. So remember, we're going to die really is uh, an encouragement not to do stuff you really don't want to do. And he uses a couple of examples in the book, which are really great. I feel where someone asks him to do something, and he's like, "No, thanks. I'm going to die someday." There's like no other context. I totally want to try that out. I don't think
Yeah.
I'm going to, but that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I thought that was very like flippant, but at the same time very good. It's like, sorry, I'm gonna die someday, so I can't
Yep.
do that. One of the things is he describes that as a problem, and again, this is a worldview thing. So I think about this like I don't worry about the fact that I'm gonna die, and it's maybe like the engineer completely like black and white section of my brain where I go, yeah, so at some point I'm gonna die. Like I'm a human, I'm gonna die. Like that's all. Like nobody gets out of this thing alive, right? That's the phrase that I've heard somebody say, and like no human gets out of this thing alive. And it's like okay, that's fine. Where I like what he brings into this chapter is the idea of how do you do more of the things that you want to do and less of the things that have been projected onto you or that somebody else's
Yep.
expectations are saying these are the things you should do. And like that's really where I like that. And that's really where I like the idea of memento mori, and I like what he's talking about here, and seeing your life as a movie is like if I look back and I watch the movie of my life, am I happy? Like, and I don't mean happy in like a, that kind of thing. It's like, am I satisfied? Do I like the trajectory it's going in? Or is there a need to be a change? Like, have I realized I've been living
Yeah.
the life of somebody else that's put that on me? And I really like this. And then when you tie this with chapter 22, which is the 8th day of the week, I think it becomes even more practical. Because in
Mm.
chapter 22, where he says the 8th day of the week, he's like, imagine that you have an extra day of the week. There's zero expectations. Time stands still. What are the things you do on that 8th day of the week? And how do you do more of those things? And when I think you put these two things together, like it gives you a really good creative way to do this is imagining that 8th day of the week and the activities I'm going to do in that, and then saying, am I doing those in the movie of my life? If I get to the end of my life and I haven't done those things that I wanted to do in that 8th day, am I disappointed? Am I okay with it? Like where do I sit with that? I think it's a really good like just mental like just thought exercise to think through how am I living the day to day in comparison to the scale of life. I just really liked it how this came together.
Interesting that you connected that with chapter 22 because I connected that with chapter 23.
Okay, all right, cool.
Chapter 23 talks about we have access to lots of time if we choose to use it well. And the goal is not to pack more in, but to pay attention and make those deliberate choices that you were talking about. And then there's a quote in here. Well, key idea. Chances are most of what you are preoccupied with today will not be important at the end of your life,
Yep.
which I think is a pretty profound statement and easy to lose sight of, especially when you've got 12 things on your to-do list that you're not going to complete.
Yep. Yeah, Mike, do you think so this is from chapter 23 as well. Do you think you're more of a dreamer or a doer? So, and let me give you while you're thinking about it. Dreamers, he say, suffer from big ideas that seldom come to fruition, and doers tend to be good at doing the wrong things, right? So they do all the
Mm-hmm.
stuff, but they don't think about whether or not it's the right thing to do. So, and I know I'm putting you on like a scale that has two ends, but like, do you think you're more of one or more of the other?
Well, I'm not quite sure how to answer this. I think there's a path to answering this, which is very obvious. So I'll describe that one. So the dreamer, that's essentially the visionary in the
Mm-hmm.
EOS world. And the yin to the yang of the visionary is the integrator. I literally was an integrator
Okay.
for a year and a
All right.
half.
Yeah. Okay. Yep.
So that's probably my natural bent. However, I don't know that that is necessarily true as I am running my own business. I think it's possible that I'm sort of a doer with dreamer tendencies.
Okay.
I think so. I say that not because, occasionally I can operate as an effective dreamer, but I think occasionally I will fall into the traps that the dreamer will fall into. But for the most part, I think I'm focused on let's create the systems and let's just do the thing.
See, I'm
What
the
about
other
you?
way. I'm the other way. Right? Like ideas, and then do they actually come to fruition? Maybe. Like sometimes they do. And I know that like that's a problem that I have. So I need a good right-hand person or, other person who's like, okay, this is what we said we're going to do. And now boom, 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 and they outline that list. I definitely know them the other way around.
All right. Anything else from this part before we get to the afterword?
I don't think so. I think we covered all the stuff I wanted to hit on. So yeah, we can go to the afterward.
Okay. Well, the afterword is a single page, so there's not a ton here, but actually, there are a couple important things that he mentions in this afterword. It's written kind of like a letter. He signs it at the bottom. Talks about how time anxiety is shared by many others around the world. There's no magic solutions, but this is the key, I think. You are not powerless. There are things that you can do to make today better than yesterday and tomorrow better than today. I really like that phrasing or that framing. And really, it's an encouragement to do something with what you have read. And then at the very end, there is a specific piece of advice, which is great advice for every book that has ever been written and every person who ever picks one up.
Okay.
Do you know what I'm going to say?
No, but this is bold. Like, I'm intrigued.
Feel free to modify the suggestions. He actually says that in the afterword. And this is something that past me needed to hear. I mentioned earlier in this episode about how when I started taking notes on books, I was like, they're the guru, they're the experts. I just have to adopt their system, and I would feel overwhelmed because it wasn't working for me. And I'd figure there must be something wrong with me. And I'd go back and I'd take copious notes and I'd reread it again. And I'm way past that now. And now it's just like, take what's useful, spit out the rest.
Yep.
You don't have to, every time you pick up a book, regardless of how many copies it has been sold, you don't have to make sure that that is the book that completely transforms your life. And How to Read a Book by Mortimer Adler kind of speaks to this. You know, you got to wrestle with the arguments the author is making. You got to decide for yourself what you're actually going to do with it. And I feel like that's a really good way to end the book. I feel like a lot of people need to be given that permission to change things about the advice that they just read. And I think that makes it actually much more potentially beneficial and applicable to a lot more people.
Yeah. I'm hoping I got this right, because I actually didn't capture whether this was in the afterword or whether it was the latter part of 26. But I like the manifesto at the end. I'm pretty sure that was in the afterword. And I like that, he basically summarizes, here are some things to just keep in mind as you're closing out this book. You've noticed, Mike, at this point, that I like it when they do that. Like, here's a wrap up of what like the key ideas are. And again, I like it here. I like that he did it, and he leaves you with that.
Nice. All right. Well, that's the book. Let's talk about action items. And I have a couple of them. I just want to make sure I didn't miss one from the notes that I grabbed here. Okay. Yep. So I've got don't save all your fun time for the weekend. This is out of necessity because weekend is quickly turning into the time when I catch up on the things that I didn't get done. I've also got the create a time-free zone where I don't care about time. I'm nervous about that one. I have a feeling I'm going to struggle with that, but give it a shot. And then make a list of the things that I am putting off. So those are my 3. What action items do you have from this, Cory?
So I have 2 coming out of this. Is the first one is think about your granny hobby, which I've then immediately turned into my physical hobby, right? Like the thing that's not just all brain activity. And then the second one I have is how do I make pockets in my schedule? How to make the pockets more productive, right? So how do I take those and do the things I actually want to do? Like, I can tell you I have a running list of those things. How do I inject those into those pockets and get some stuff done on the things that I want to do? Not for the sake of productivity, but because I want to do those things. Like, I want more time to do those things.
Yeah. All right. So, style and rating. This one's tricky for me because I actually really like the style. However, I don't think I love the tiny chapters. You mentioned that as we're going through the episode, and I think I'm the same way. I would rather have 8 to 10 chapters. Give me some meat to chew on, and then I'll decide what to do with it.
Can
Go
I
ahead.
interrupt you for 1 second? We didn't say this at the beginning, and I meant to say it, and I just totally forgot. So the chapter had like basically the core concept that he was going to talk about, and then it had a practice section at the end of every one. Mike, did you
Hmm.
find the practice sections valuable?
Sometimes.
Okay.
They were all tactics basically for how to apply something, but sometimes they had different and more interesting ideas than the chapter itself.
hmm So I thought they were very hit or miss too, which I think is interesting. Like I kind of led the witness with the question, but at the same time, some of them where I was just like, this is pointless. Like what? Like we didn't need this here. And then other ones I was like, oh man, this is actually better than what you wrote in the last 10 pages. So I thought that was an interesting takeaway as well. So sorry, I'll let you continue on with your style and rating.
No, that is important, and that actually affects the rating, I think, because I would argue if you're going to have those practice sessions, they really should be insanely valuable. Maybe that's not
Mm-hmm.
the approach he was taking with the book. Maybe that's not his intention. Maybe it's more, grab whichever ones really speak to you and try them out. He does give you permission to change them, so I can't really fault him for taking the approach that he did. But my ideal version of I was going to say this book, but really just a book like in this genre,
Mm-hmm.
the bookworm type of book would be give me some big ideas to wrestle with and give me some recommendations for how you think I should apply those. I don't need a bunch of options for productivity tactics.
Yeah.
That just makes you feel a little bit more overwhelmed and kind of maybe even potentially works against the idea of overcoming the problem of time anxiety because it's like I've got how many different chapters here? Let me look again. 26. They've all got a practice piece. So
Mm-hmm.
26 different things I have to try out before I can really find what works. Uh, no thanks.
Yep. 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 Yep.
I do like his writing style though. I think he's a very good storyteller. I think he's a really interesting guy. By the way, I think the inspiration behind the World Domination Summit is this internal goal he has of being in every country, which is kind of a cool goal. Like I
It
don't
is a
want to
cool
do
goal.
that, but it'd be neat to be able to say that you accomplished that. And he's got lots of interesting stories from lots of interesting people, like the guy who literally just flew to somewhere in Europe every week and never
I
left the
can't.
airport.
I can't believe we made it here and we didn't talk about that story because I was just like, wait, what? You just flew around and then would hang out in the airport for a little bit and then fly home? Okay. Like, I mean, that's cool, I guess.
Yeah, and I think that was the one about, what do you really want to do? Just do it. You don't need reasons, you don't need justifications. But yeah, there was literally a guy who would book a cheap flight somewhere in Europe once a week. He would fly there, hang out in the airport for 2 hours, get back on the plane and fly home.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Again, not for me, but I think that those types of things culminate in a book that feels very original. I don't think just my perspective having read this, a lot of the books that we read, you get done and you're like, well, this actually is very similar to this other book, and I like the way that the other book spoke about these things a little bit differently. I think the whole framing, the title, time anxiety, just the weird, quirky way that this is put together feels very unique, and I think there's some really good stuff in here. I think Chris Guillebeau is a good writer, and I think this one is one I would generally recommend, especially to people who are a little bit skeptical maybe about productivity books, or I don't know, they don't they have sort of like a negative visceral reaction to something like The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People or
Eat
How
that
to Win
frog.
Friends and Influence People. Like those are great books, but you just take the title and you're like, ew, if you're
Uh-huh.
that type of person, this is probably a great one. And the Chris's style feels very approachable and does a great job of making the author seem like someone who is just a fellow traveler on this journey that you're going on. So he's sharing his own stories, his own struggles. He shared, which I appreciated, how he used to think this way and now he thinks a different way. So you can kind of see how he's changed his mind about things over time. I wish more people would do that. I think there's some things in here that are potentially life changing. I don't think he goes into them long enough for them to actually be life changing.
Okay. Okay.
Which is why I'm going to rate this a 4-star book.
Okay.
I think there's a version of this which is a 5-star book, but didn't get there for me. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I don't know, who he's trying to reach with this, and it feels like a little bit of a departure based on the previous books that he's read. But I do hope that he writes more books in this vein. I think he's kind of onto something here. But yeah, 4 stars.
Okay. So I came into this one being like, I don't know how I feel about this book. Time anxiety. I don't really feel like I struggle with that kind of a thing. I've talked to you about the fact that the practices were kind of like hit or miss, very, very hit or miss for me. We've worked through all the stuff. I agree with you completely on the fact that I liked his writing style. Like it was just, I don't want to say it was a fun book to read, but it was one of those books that was just like, it flowed well. It was natural.
Mm-hmm.
He told good stories. He brought in enough personal, but not too much personal to where it was like, okay, like we're not writing a biography. Like we're actually talking about concepts here. I think some of the chapters had more value than others. I think a place where I would a little bit disagree with you is the idea of like, I probably wouldn't recommend this book to very many people unless they are anxious about time, right? Like, unless I can tell like, oh, you are just stressed out about like daily routine and life and not feeling productive enough, or you're going to die one day or something like that. I think for me to really recommend this book to somebody, they're going to have a very specific need that I can't fully describe right now, but it's going to be around the idea of time and productivity and being anxious around not being able to get enough done. So that really drops my rating a little bit lower, I would say, is the fact that, some of the things were a little bit hit or miss. I think there's some good nuggets in this book, but I don't know if reading the entire book is worth it for the nuggets that pull out, because like you said, which I do agree with, I don't think the concepts are talked about enough to be like life-changing. Like it's just like, oh, there's a good nugget. I wonder what to do with that. There's a good nugget. I wonder what to do with that. So I am actually going to be a little bit more negative than you, and I'm by no means negative, but it's like I'm going to be more negative than you. I'm debating. You had made a comment that for some reason has left my brain, so I can't blank on that. But you made a comment that I thought was good, and it brought me up to a 3.5. So coming into this, it was a 3. This was a 3 book. Not great, not terrible. Kind of sat right there in the middle of everything. Wouldn't really recommend it to that many people. They'd have to be in a very specific situations. There's a million books I'd recommend before this one. So I was sitting at a 3, but then you made a comment. I wish I remembered what it was, but you made a comment that was like, oh yeah, that does bump this up to a 3.5. So I'm going to rate this one a 3.5-star book. And yeah, I think it's okay. Like there's some good stuff in it, and I don't think it's life-changing.
All right. Well, let's put Time Anxiety on the shelf. What's next, Cory?
All right, so the next book is mine. It is called Sponsor Magnet by Justin Moore. The subtitle is How to Attract, Price, and Execute Your Dream Brand Partnerships. One of the things I want to disclaim on this is by no means is this book a directly apply this to Bookworm and how do we build sponsors for Bookworm. That was not the goal of this. Mike told me about this book. I looked at it and I was like, oh, this would be actually a really cool book to think about partnerships, because that's really what I am interested in thinking about is with the day job at CCU, with Bookworm, with some of the other projects that like Mike and I work on. Sponsors are a type of partnership. Like we need resources to do the work that we do. Sponsors want to give resources to support the work, but like everybody needs to think about like what that looks like to come together and what it looks like for them to sponsor you and then for you to take on a sponsor. So I'm hoping that Justin goes into these ideas around not just how to get people to give you money, but I'm hoping that he goes in. It's like, how do you actually develop these really strong partnerships that can propel both organizations or however many organizations there are forward? That's my hope out of this book. I also like too that it's a recent book. So this was published on January 21st of 25. So it's a relevant book for for sponsorships. So I'm hoping that's what we get out of
Yep.
it, and that's why I'm excited about it. How about you? You have
All
the next one.
right. Well, I want to maybe temper your expectations a little bit.
Okay.
So the person who designed the website for Sponsor Magnet is actually the person who designed my sales pages for like Life HQ and Practical PKM. So if you go to sponsormagnet.com, you can actually see a little bit more about the book. I think there's definitely going to be some stuff that is applicable for you, but this is really about turning the stuff that you make into sponsored content. So
Okay, cool.
if you want to call an audible and change it,
Nope.
that's fine. But okay.
No, I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah. And as I mentioned last time, Justin is a great guy. So I am happy to shine a light on his book. I think with sponsorships in general, I want to encourage people not to think that this doesn't apply to me. I think that's even for a creator like me, it's easy to think like, oh, well, this doesn't apply to me because I'm not big enough yet. I don't have a big enough audience. And I think this book is going to speak to that and help maybe overcome those limiting beliefs. But we will see. After that, I have a listener recommendation, which is Made to Stick by Chip and Dan Heath. So thank you, Andrew, for recommending this. I love Chip and Dan Heath's books. I forget which ones we've covered for Bookworm. I know for sure Decisive back in the day, and I really enjoyed that one. So Made to Stick is on my bookshelf, but I have not read it yet. And if you want to recommend a book for Bookworm, we would love to have you do that. There will be a link to make a recommendation in the show notes for this episode. All right. You got any Gap books, Corey?
Okay, so I do. It's called. Oh my gosh, why am I blanking on it right now? Oh, I'm totally blanking on the name of this book. Like I feel like such a dud. Hold on a second. Words of Life. There. Whew. Oh my gosh, I can't believe it took me that long to get it. It's called Words of Life, and it's a book for. I told you about that little mini seminary thing I'm doing, so I have to have Words of
Mm-hmm.
Life finished for next week, and I'm in the process of reading that. Oh my goodness, I feel so silly that it took me that long to figure that out. A book that I'm actively reading right now, but no, it's basically about scripture, and it's kind of about how scripture impacts us as Christians. So, how about you? Any Gap books?
I do not have a Gap book. Maybe I'll have one that I can share from next time around,
Okay.
but I'm just gonna get through Sponsor Magnet first.
Okay, makes sense. All right. Well, if you're following along with us, pick up Sponsor Magnet. We want to tell you about the pro show that we did. Today we talked about visual thinking and visual kind of connections between different things, Excalidraw, MindNode, those type of things. So if you're interested in the pro show, you can go to patreon.com/bookwormfm. You get a longer ad-free show. You get the bootleg, which is released faster than the normal show. We've got a wallpaper there. It's $7 a month, and it would just help support the show and keep things moving forward.
All right. So if you are reading along with us, pick up Sponsor Magnet, and we'll talk to you in a couple of weeks.